FinCom meeting to order. It's, yeah, we have a quorum, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, perfect. Thanks everyone for getting together. I know it was this was a rug pulled in, pulled out, pulled back in. So thanks everyone for making the time to meet today. So agenda. That stated agenda is to review and vote on the financial articles for the 10/18 special town meeting, and then review financial articles for the November subsequent November town meeting, and then we'll approve minutes. Just as and I guess I can do a few housekeeping items at the end, but we might as well.
You want to do them now?
Yeah, it might be a good idea. And so I guess, so one of the things too, and we'll just start to make it a natural, see the genes here, perfect timing, no other business. Just kidding. So one of the things that I was going to say is on, kind of future agendas, we'll start to add in, kind of a baked in agenda item for liaison reports and things of that nature. And I guess one item for the liaison reports that, I don't think we necessarily needed to, have a novella, for that. It's just things that are, that when you're attending those meetings that might have a finance, implications versus, the nuts and bolts of a select board meeting or a school committee meeting, at least from that perspective. So I think that would be probably, again, just helpful, because I don't think all of us are going to attend every one of those meetings. Just a little bit from that perspective. And so, kind of given that, and as I say that, I did attend or listen in to the select board, one of the last select board meetings, and just as in case folks hadn't, they are accepting applications for the screening committee for town manager. I think they're accepting them up through this week. So just more FYI, as I said, we would only talk about things that have financial implications. This one doesn't, but I figured that meeting was kind of an afternoon meeting, and so just figured I'd let folks know. So, but that's, go ahead, Jean.
The reason I'm late, really late, is the front door to town hall is locked.
So just go in from it though.
I just came in that door.
Somebody locked it.
Security
Yeah,
system.
I was with 2 other people, none of us could open the door.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, if there's an open meeting, we should plan.
Nope, we got a, we have, just about every, we have everybody.
From an open meeting law perspective?
Oh, well, some doors will be open.
Okay, thank you.
We'll let it back in if you can.
Thank you very much.
I had to squeeze it hard to pull it, but I did get in.
Thank you. Sure, sorry.
No worries at all. Okay, perfect. All right, so unless anyone else has any other, kind of business or anything, we can just start on the agenda on the October financial articles. So, Bob, you want to start with that, or is that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll give you a little bit of a time frame too, and also just to remind you, we're all kind of still new at this. If and when you vote tonight, it all has to be roll call, and that's Jeff's fault.
Right. No worries, Jeffrey.
So,
I'm going to visit my mom this weekend, so I wanted to, minimize my exposure.
very good reason. For the October special, we'll review the articles, and there's the articles in the warrant, and then there's details in the articles that you're going to be asked to vote for. For the subsequent town meeting in November, there's just articles with no details that you're just going to review. And again, in both cases, I'll outline typically which articles FinCom votes on or doesn't vote on, but you're always free to do that.
I mean, so and then for the November articles, if we do the financial forum in mid-October, we should be, that's enough time to be able to vote on those. Is that enough time?
Do you remember the date? No, I don't think it is. I was planning on, that was the other part of this, is from a calendar standpoint, whatever you do tonight is more important for October
Right.
than November, because
Right.
clearly we're not showing you details for November.
Right.
But you're planning to meet on, I believe it's September 30th, and then we would show you the details, whatever they may be.
Oh,
for
okay.
the November town meeting.
Oh, okay.
And if there's something you need to either reconsider or vote for the October town meeting, then you can. But as I tried to outline in the emails, you're meeting on a Thursday night. The deadline for us to get things to town meeting members are the next Monday.
Okay.
So that's the main reason I'm really glad you decided to meet tonight, because we can prepare all the written material from what you do tonight and send it to FinCom. As you may have gathered, the warrant report backgrounds that I sent to you was for you, not town meeting.
Yep.
And some of the things would be edited and changed. It was really for your background. And then pending your discussion and your decisions, then that would be edited for town meeting.
Got it.
Just
Yep.
just to be clear.
Yep.
So let me start with the October. That should be what was sent to you. Something got sent to you later, and that was the vocational school. That's November, so that's nothing to do with what we're going to discuss right now. Perfect. We'll discuss that next. The first article FinCom should typically care about is Article 3, which is changing the capital plan. There's nothing in there that is different from the meeting we just had, with one exception. Let me find it. And again, it's not immediate action, but there's a sewer station project that was bid out, and the bids came in after your last meeting and before tonight that put the contingency in jeopardy. So the bids came in under the total, but it narrowed the contingency funds. So right now, staff's inclined to ask for $250,000 for the sewer station to be funded in November town meeting. So they're not asking for money in October, they're just asking to add it to the capital plan. There's no particular reason why it has to be added to the capital plan, it's just that we know it's coming and it's transparent if you do it this way. So I think that's the only change from the financial form, was that development. So again, I'm happy to go over any of the capital items, specifically on Article 3. If there's any questions, or I can just go over them all if you prefer.
Good.
I just want to clarify that the additional capital spending proposed for this year is completely covered by operational savings.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
it's like 5 for this year, yes. Then you'll see that in the next article,
Thanks.
except for the enterprise funds.
Yeah.
But none of those are being done in October. Would the committee prefer me to go over this? I'm happy to. Okay.
Anybody else feel differently?
And then,
Yeah, well, Kim?
Well, if the committee doesn't have any questions, I had one question about one item on Article 3. I was just wondering, Birch Meadow ES site improvements moved out 1 year. What is that?
elementary school,
Oh, the elementary school.
with a new superintendent, we thought we better just delay work until he has time to get his feet under him.
Yes,
So-
that makes sense with the new hire.
Yeah, similar work happened at another elementary school. This was the second one, and it's not urgent, Joe, and certainly our Dave can actually fill it.
Okay, I didn't know what ES stood for, so that clears that up. Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, Bob, this is just a formalities question, just so I know I'm looking at the right one. I noticed the packet for FinCom was updated about noon today, so that's the one I should be looking at versus any
The only
most
difference
recent
is the
email.
addition of the Voc School information.
Okay, and I
There
can go
isn't-
back to my email for
Yeah.
that. All right, thanks.
Yeah. Would you prefer me to go through all the warrant articles? Do you want to come back and vote on them later, or do you want to do them one at a time, vote, and then sometimes you assign someone to talk at that meeting?
Let's, unless anyone feels differently, I'd rather, just let's have a review of all of them,
Okay.
and then we can come back and then, because there may be something later on that, that leads to a question on one that we might have
Sure.
voted on,
Okay.
or planned to vote on.
The next one that's financial is Article 4. This is identical to the financial form. In response to Gene's questions, you can see C99 capital, $385,000 is fully paid for by transferring other funds. And one of the reasons that we approach it this way, well, first of all, is we had the flexibility to do it. But especially at a September town meeting, free cash would not have been certified, so we're not allowed to use free cash. Free cash may or may not be certified by October 18th. And that's also the reason, or one of the reasons, we didn't ask for any enterprise funds, because those reserve funds are not available until they and free cash is certified. So
Let me understand that, if I may, Bob. We have, what, $17 million or something in free cash, and we expect it to go up or down a couple million, and we can't spend any of it until it's certified?
all yours.
Yeah, it has to be certified by DOR before we can use it. So they have to look at our financials and agree on the total of what the number is before it can be used each year.
Is there some way that we could take a chunk of that and put it into some other fund so that, you know, put 10 million into that, we're gonna use this next year fund, and the rest of it, you know, the 7 and change, into some other fund that we could then say, okay, this is our free cash that has to be certified, but we absolutely know that we have 10 million plus that's been in there for, you know, the last 5 years or something, right?
Like 12, not 17.
I don't think it's 17, I think it's like 12, yeah. It's definitely lower than that, because we used up almost 3 million last year.
Yeah, Jeff, the answer is yes. FinCom has discussed in the past whether to take some free cash, if you will, and park it somewhere else. Not necessarily for this reason, but there's many reasons. And one of the options is there's already existing a stabilization fund with $1 million or $2 million in it. That can be used at any time by any 2/3 vote at town meeting. So that would accomplish what you're
Yeah,
suggesting.
and it's
for
just a
instance.
greater vote.
And that would require a future article, I believe, to do that transfer. We want to take yay much from free cash, put it in the stabilization fund.
Sure. But so normally spending out of free cash does not require the 2/3, right? But it does
Correct.
require the certification by the state of the amount.
Right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, just a couple of questions on your Article 4. So why did the veterans benefits decrease by 25,000? And my other question is, I saw we have the decrease in animal control, and I understand that might have involved someone going out on leave in the past. And we see regional animal control added. Is that gonna be something we expect moving forward, that we'll just transition to regional?
Yeah, unfortunately, in the veterans case, veterans and their spouses have passed away, so there's less of them.
So that would be
This
probably
still-
moving forward.
This
we
still
wouldn't have-
leaves an unspent cushion, because we think it will increase again.
Okay.
But for this year, you know, we probably could have taken 50,000 away, and it
I
would
see.
be safe. But I didn't want to lower the baseline any more than what it is.
Right, my basic thing was always this moving, these will probably be permanent kinds of things moving forward.
I would say for the veterans benefits for next year, we would budget 25,000 less than we would have, yes.
Okay.
For the animal control, we are transitioning from a wage and a person to a outsource. So the select board in Reading have agreed to an intermunicipal agreement with Wakefield. They're actually voting on it tonight. We want to use 2 employees that we don't hire, so it would be an expense to us. And, you know, it's probably going to be even less than 25, but since we don't know yet, I thought it was safe to leave it balanced.
Then at least we have the resource. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Any other questions on, for Bob on 4?
Okay, let's see what 5 is. Oh yeah, the next 3 are debt authorizations. The first one, the police station. I think I described that in the past as a 2-part project, if you will, and the chief's here and the facilities director is needed. The first is to finish off an expansion room and turn that into a emergency operations center, as well as a conference room to be used for training. Training is currently not done in the station except at the police officers' individual desks. Once upon a time, the conference room downstairs was used for some police training. And then the second part is for the conference room downstairs to change into offices for health, mental health, and the coalition staff to sort of work together. So I don't know, Dave, if you want to add anything to that, because I've told them before, but you haven't.
So it's basically, part of it would be it makes sense with the coalition, where we don't have really room right now for the mental health position. So to put the coalition mental health position into the same office area, but still allowing some privacy for them. and public health work together. We think it would help build the relationship between the health department and the coalition and the mental health position, because they're gonna be working so closely together. But also offers them a way, that conference room off the lobby. The public can come and go as they please without having to deal with any of the officers of dispatch. But if the health department or the coalition or the mental health person need to meet with somebody off hours, they wouldn't be alone here in the town hall. They'd still be in a secured building where they can actually limit access if they need to, and it just makes it a little bit safer of an environment, and safer environment for anybody that might need to come in seeking help. And moving the training, that room is not functional for an emergency operations center. It's all glass windows in front of the building, and anytime we had an incident going on, you have to leave the secured part of that room, enter the secured part of the lobby, then go back in the secured part of the building. It just didn't function well. I remember a couple times in the past when we did have large events going on, the press was in the lobby, and every time we stepped out to do something, the press was trying to grab you, trying to grab a quote or whatever, and you had to kind of get through to get back in the secured part of the building. And that was including even just using the restroom, because there's no restroom right in that area. And then moving the training upstairs would give us a better operations center and a better training room, because our focus is on, even before police reform, our focus is on more, better training, more training, and especially the police reform. We just want to make sure we're really giving the officers all the training they need, and having a better training room in that part of the expansion space will give us what we need for that.
So, maybe this question between Bob and Chief Clark. So for the coalition now, are they, where are they located now?
So they're on the second floor of the police station, just outside detectives. Erica and, let's say, Ms. Elkin were crammed into an office together that honestly should be a one-person office, but they're kind of crammed in there together. So this will give them more space down in that room with the layout than they currently have now, and also allow the mental health counselor, once that's hired, to go in there with them.
And so anyone that, this gets, I think you might have mentioned this, one of the two of you might have mentioned this at the forum, but right now, if anyone comes in and wants to see them, they have to be escorted.
So they have to check with dispatch, and either Eric or Sammy would have to go downstairs, talk to them, and meet in the private interview room, or yes, they have to be escorted into the building and escorted back out.
Gotcha.
And it kind of takes away where people feel comfortable coming in sometimes,
Yep.
but it still keeps them safe if it's in their front part of the building, if that makes sense.
Totally, no, I totally agree. No, I was super conscious, and obviously it's been a major focus for the town. It came up in the last town meeting, as far as, kind of staffing and everything else. And so it would seem that this is a logical place to not having having misstep. After, kind of, from a staffing perspective, then you want to make sure that you're executing on it, on the back end. And this is, I just wanted to clarify, again, where they are, what the situation is now, how this improves it from that perspective. So that's helpful.
And from a public health standpoint, one of the complaints I got constantly with them in this building is lack of privacy.
Yeah.
For very similar reasons. Someone wants to come in and have a discussion. HR used to have the same problem. They used to have to go out in common and have to sit on a bench, because there's just no privacy.
Yep.
This would allow them to share a small conference room and
Yep.
take turns, but at least there's a dedicated place
There's a
that no one
spot.
else is going to use.
Exactly, yep.
And also, they keep supplies anyway at the police station, and we're one of the largest
Oh, yeah.
generators, 24/7 generator, which would give us a chance for certain supplies like flu vaccines, COVID vaccines on that generator with the refrigerator. Keeps it closer to them anyway. So it serves a multitude of purposes.
Yep, that's perfect. That's exactly the pieces that I was interested in. Any other questions around, I don't know, Bob, you got any more?
Yeah.
Just the other comment that you asked me to ask Sharon, and she's here to tell you, she didn't think this work would qualify under the federal ARPA grant, just so you know.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just thinking back on that conference room in the police center. I've been there twice. I think once Arcasa had a hidden in plain sight where they kind of mocked up a teenager's room as to where, drugs might be hidden.
Yep.
And another time they had a mental health first response training that was held in that conference room. If we repurpose that conference room to offices, where would those activities now take place?
The smaller things can still happen in that area, but like I remember the teenager bedroom, that would have to be in another location. Or if, discussed, it can be in that secure new conference room upstairs in the police station.
Okay.
it's a pre-planned event, we can use that space for that, because we can just make plans to make sure there's somebody kind of keep an eye on people coming and going. But it's just for daily use, it's not functional for where the coalition is right now. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah.
Any other, yeah, go ahead.
Like to that point about like police reform and calls for more training, is there more money like in the operating plan?
So I
to
did,
accommodate that?
yes, I did ask in the budget for fiscal year, sorry, I was messing up what you were in.
22, I think.
22, okay, sorry.
We all get it, none of us get it right. You could have picked a number and it'd been fine.
I did ask for additional funding for training specifically for that purpose. And it's, we've been seeking out as much training as we can, sending off as much as we can. A lot of it has been remote. We had a bunch of trainings canceled. We are going back to, most of these trainings have gone back in person, coming out of remote, or being able to host a bigger conference rooms. Sometimes allows us to host a training, whereas if we can guarantee 30 seats, we get 4 for free, as long as we open up to other agencies coming in. So it's also a price benefit having that training. Yep.
Okay, good.
Actually, I had another question. So again, some of this was, it's staged because of some of the stuff done with dispatch. Could you just remind me again, like, what, and again, I haven't been in the station for, well, like, so is there more space, or is it still, where dispatch is still that same amount of space? You're not taking anything from that community room, but of kind of, because that was adjacent to dispatch, wasn't it?
You better answer.
So,
Yeah,
when as soon as you walk in the lobby, the community room is off to your right.
Yeah, to the right, yep.
Dispatch is off to your left, but it's separated between bathrooms, supply closets, some other stuff, so they actually don't connect and they're not side by side.
Okay.
It kind of looks that way, but it's not.
Okay.
So the dispatch redo renovation, it was within the existing space.
Okay.
So it didn't take anything away from the lobby or that training room. Right now, that room is being used for roll call and for the report writing room and to store extra materials that we had, because we had to set up a temporary dispatch in the sergeant's office. The sergeants are now down in what was roll call. We just had to kind of shift a bunch of items around. So it didn't take away from that space at all or off the lobby. Everything was facilities, and the architects did a fantastic job of really working within that space and getting everything set up for us.
And so, so they're just about done with dispatch, or is that done?
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed Wednesday.
Sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to jinx anything.
So after Wednesday night, I'll be able to breathe. Wednesday is the transfer over where we're starting to turn on the new systems. So our 911 calls will be going over towards Wakefield. We're sending dispatchers over to Wakefield, and they'll slowly start turning on the positions and doing all the upgrades. So in theory, if everything goes smoothly, Wednesday night, they'll be operational in the new dispatch center, and then we can start tearing down the temporary dispatch center. Rooms, yeah. And then we're gonna upgrade a little bit of the sergeant's office, just because some of the equipment is already in there, we can upgrade. Yep.
And so, and again, sorry for a lot of questions around this one, but, so then, kind of given that, is it, kind of the pieces that are in the article about, you kind of take into account all of the stuff that's already been done, and it's kind of an easy transition. And again, I'm always kind of looking at this from a cost perspective, but is that, is there a benefit from a cost perspective, to kind of quickly kind of transition over and do this next set of work versus stopping, pausing, and from that perspective?
In terms of the design work, there was, and that's why we did it this way. In terms of moving, I'd say the more urgent reasons are the cost of construction and the mental health position that doesn't have a home, that just had a plan on. The health department, has adequate space at town hall. It's going to be better for them to move, but it's not urgent. So it's really not like in get to performance contracting where this piece got added because it's cost effective. I wouldn't say that the construction is cost effective. It's just bid out and priced.
Gotcha. No, and again, I appreciate, just knowing the facts, as far as if there's something else that makes it, that makes it more appealing, less appealing, I just want to make sure that, we have.
Sure.
Any other questions besides for me? We're probably going to move on.
Okay, Article 6 is the...
Oh, sorry, Karen.
Hi.
Sorry.
Sorry, thank you. I love FinCom, thank you guys. Okay, questions, a couple of questions about this project, because it was added to the capital plan this year, I think. But we haven't seen a lot of detail either, so I appreciate you guys are both here. The questions I have concerns, or questions about, just looking for more information. So this is a $1.5 million project, and if it was a little bit higher, it would have gone before the permanent building committee. And we're in kind of a weird environment where wood prices go way up and then they come down, and some things are available and some things aren't. Some residents have said to me, this seems expensive. So can you guys help me understand, like, take it down as, you explained functionally, and that makes a lot of sense. So what's driving the cost to make it functionally be a training center and a command center sometimes, and then the build out for the downstairs? Because it's 800 for one conference room and 600,000 for the other, or 700 right now.
Yeah. So construction costs have gone up dramatically in the last 18 months. We're seeing, square foot cost to build out spaces, much higher than we did like in 2019, for instance, 2019. And that has a lot to do with supply chain. It has a lot to do with, prevailing wage rates do go up every year. Keep in mind like that the work that we're doing over there is raw space. And what I mean that is if you were in the expansion space and you looked at it, it's basically just studs and walls.
Okay.
Studs and walls and a concrete floor in there. So in that number, which is the other reason the number is high, is the construction materials have gone up, prevailing wage rates have go up every year. These prices include, I believe it was furniture, fixtures, and equipment is all in that price, which is to outfit the space, if you will. And when I mean that, I'm talking about casework, I'm talking about conference room chairs, tables, AV equipment, everything is in that price. Now, so that's the expansion space, okay? So that's like more or less a wide open area up there, right? There's some HVAC involved in it. There's gonna be condensing, we're gonna use the existing air conditioning, the chiller is part of, is targeted for replacement under performance contracting, which will be able to cool the space, but we do need to install things like VAV boxes in there to so that you have zone control, if you will, right? So that's one thing. So then the first floor, we took a careful look at what we had down there and how many, what the population is gonna be in the space. And some of the area will be landscape partitions to save money, because there's not gonna be a need for the walls to go all the way up in certain areas, but there's a conference room and one or two offices. I have to look.
Two offices are private.
Two offices, right, for privacy reasons. And we did that to save money, because, it would be quite expensive if you wanted to build, walls that went up to the grid, and then, like up to the ceiling deck, and then you'd run into issues with fire alarm, sprinkler, and then more HVAC work. So I feel like the prices are good, they're good prices, they are higher, and we did see that, we've seen that in competitive bidding across the board with, rates and materials prices have gone up. Anything, lumber has gone through the roof. I don't know if anybody's been to Home Depot, but, 2x4s were up over like almost $7 for a 2x4. They've started to come back down again, but we're never gonna see them where they were before. Copper, anything metal that has metal in it, which is petitions, studs, metal studs, that stuff's gone through the roof. So I don't know if that helps explain.
Yeah, that was, yep. Would it be possible for town meeting to get like a summary of the costs that are going into this, Bob?
Sure.
So it sounds like you've taken it all the way to the quote, like these are quotes, or?
No, so
Okay.
what happens in public construction is, we're required by law to put stuff out to bid under chapter 149,
Okay.
that's building construction,
Yeah.
okay? So what we always do is we have an architect look at something, so like even in the capital plan, the numbers you see in the capital plan for facilities in any other department in town are prices that are vetted out. We get good cost estimates. When you get your better cost estimate is where, like I say, okay, design this for me. Once you get to like, a certain point in the design, they begin to refine that cost estimate even better. Because you're done with the programming, which is what color carpet do you want, what color chairs do you want, how's the space gonna operate. So as you get further and further along in the design, then you get your refined cost estimate. Then the package gets put together, it gets put out to competitive bid.
All right.
I don't know if that answers.
Well, it would just be the background on the economy. I think it's good for town meeting to hear. And
Yep.
I don't know if you're, when you do it at this level, you drive it on a cost per square foot basis. That could be it, because I don't know how big those spaces are. I've never
Yeah, I
seen it.
mean, everything is, there is a cost per square foot associated with a lot of, with construction, definitely. It's a lot more expensive in the public sector to do work because of prevailing wage. So, you know, because we're a municipality and we fall under what's called prevailing wage, and prevailing wage dictates the rate that we have to pay. It's usually around the same rate as like a union electrician would make. Prevailing wage is pretty close to that, but it's way more than you'd pay that if you had someone come to your home, for instance, and put an outlet in at maybe $50 an hour. Prevailing wage is, you know, for, to give you an example, it could be up over $120 an hour for an electrician to come in to do work for us. So yeah, that's what you're paying, you know, it's just how it's structured in, under chapter 149.
Okay. And then,
So to answer your question, and I'll take it one step further, you know, they do give us a preliminary cost estimate, but like I said, it's important to remember as you get closer to construction and they get the design honed in, then you have a better idea what that number's gonna be. I feel confident in the numbers, and we've done a
that's
lot.
big enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All
And the
right.
chief is directly involved in all those meetings, obviously, because obviously he's the stakeholder. I mean, I'm still in the meetings too, but, you know, that's where you get, making sure you get what you want too at the same time.
And then the other concern had to do with the time frame and the design for execution. So since that lower space especially is going to be mental health, public health, and the coalition with a new mental health person. So those are hires that are yet to be done. And Bob was kind enough to share with me, you know, some of the not so easy things going on in the employment sector these days. So I'm a little so in terms of looking at big chunks of money that we're going to spend this fall, I asked whether this project could be broken up so that we could have those hires in place to make sure that space is designed to meet the needs. I think especially on the bottom level, but it might, those are some considerations that.
Karen, the concern is I hired a mental health person. Where am I putting them? And that's, could be.
Understood, it's like
Yeah,
a chicken and egg question,
yeah,
but we haven't
it's-
posted the mental health position yet, because you don't have a coalition director yet, right? This is what I got my information from Bob. They're still posting on the website for a coalition director.
Erica McNamara, no, she's the coalition director.
Okay, they're still
There was
posting.
an outreach coordinator.
Outreach
Oh, okay,
coordinator.
Yeah.
and so what I understood from you, and I got the name wrong, so you would like the outreach coordinator hired and then post the mental health worker.
That should be imminent.
Okay, and those are people that are going to be living in that space.
Yep.
Correct.
So one of the, Board of Health folks I asked, so is Erica gonna lead the charge on designing out that space? Has she been involved in this at all?
We'll have people, we have the architects come on looking at the space, giving ideas to us what can and can't work, because if you don't have somebody that can measure out, tell us exactly what can fit in there, working around, again, we've talked about sprinkler systems with different offices and stuff, it's on the early stages.
Who
of that.
understands what that space
Yeah.
is gonna be used for?
Yeah.
Because I know you know what you need to do with that other space.
Yep.
But where we have these outstanding hires and a multi-purpose space downstairs, okay, questions I'm getting really to making sure that, that's design option, and whether we need to spend it now, or whether it could be wait till the spring, but, okay, that's it, sorry. Thank you.
Any other questions on, what was this next?
5. 6 is
Bill 583.
the performance contracting.
Yep.
A number of us were in a meeting today with RMLD and MAPC. And it's going to be a nice presentation at the climate advisories meeting upcoming, I think it's next week. Again, the background written. I think, having seen a dry run of the presentation today, which I'll send out as soon as they want to make some revisions, and I'll send it out maybe tomorrow. It really puts the last 10 or 15 years in a good perspective. What the town did before, what it saved, what the benefit was, and what the town proposes to do this time, and what it will save. So it lines up well. They're also going to discuss, I guess I'll say, green communities like projects that are not technically under this umbrella. So this is specifically improvements to the municipal buildings that will yield the most efficient savings, and again, with the exception of those boilers. There is other work that could happen on buildings. There's other work that could happen in the community, but none of that will yield what the green communities looks for in pure energy savings. So that's, if you will, almost a phase 3, if this is phase 2. And as a placeholder, it's in the capital plan for $1 million. That number can go up and go down, depending on the pleasure of the community. The consultant from Noresco will, or MAPC, I'm not sure, will discuss some of those other options that are not technically part of this building project, such as solar. And Joe can talk about looking at solar options for the Parker roof that was approved last spring. Technically speaking, solar does not lead to energy savings for the purposes of green communities. It doesn't mean there's lots of other reasons it's not a good thing, but it doesn't technically meet the definition of what green community wants. The things in this article, with the slight exception of the boilers, do meet that. So again, I'm happy to go over any of this in any detail, and I would urge anyone interested to come to the Climate Advisory Committee meeting or to watch it on Zoom. I'm sure it'll be available. It'll describe what I have described to you over, I think it's 3 meetings, but more on a sort of expert level. And if anyone has questions, they would certainly be able to answer questions I couldn't. And they're happy to get down as deeply in the weeds as someone needs to. As you can imagine, this is a topic that can get very specialized very quickly for specific improvements. And I learned today, and I never knew this, that we saved about 17% in energy improvements the first go-round. And I don't know, there was an enormous amount of both energy and dollars saved over that period. It's annually 400-something thousand that we've saved. But we had debt service to pay off, we're still paying it off. So, it wasn't done for the financial reason only. But after your debt service is paid, that'll be free savings every year. In fact, it's more than the debt service now anyways.
And that's the one that ends in 25?
Yes. And I don't remember, but the debt service is below the energy savings. That was the concept when we first did it that many years ago, is that it would pay for itself. And it has. And in this case, it's a lot different the second time around, because the first time around it was such a new and revolutionary thing. It was never done in a budget the way we were doing it. It was done as a lease, so no one saw anything. And the vendor collected all the savings. We wouldn't get any because he executed a lease at a much higher internal rate of return than we were able to borrow. So this time it doesn't need to be as complicated, but that doesn't mean it couldn't become more detailed discussion in town. It's, let's say you're going to borrow for 15 years, it's going to cost you X. Each year you're going to save Y. Y will be greater than X again, but it's sort of close, maybe 100,000 more. And then after 15 years, it's sort of free savings, if you will. But you're also, the way this is timed out is there'll be 2 or 3 years of overlap. And then the first year's project will be full and clear in terms of savings that don't go to debt service. Budget process makes the discussion a little different than some communities. Our debt and our facilities costs for energy were all in the same accommodated cost bucket, which made it really easy for us to understand. So it wasn't saving the school department any money or the towns any money. It was all in one sort of central location. When it was a school committee savings, which is done in typically other communities, that was a whole other discussion, a whole different type of discussion. they were asked to give up a portion of their budget for 15 years to pay for something in the future. It just was a very different discussion. So happy to answer any other questions. Joe is here. He's sat through most of this. He can add in. And I said about 60,000. Joe reminded me today the back-out fee if we decide not to do this or town meeting doesn't approve it is 57,000. So close to 60,000.
Just as, when I read through your supporting information here, I know there'll be a more complicated presentation at town meeting, but if I were explaining this to a neighbor or someone else in 2 sentences, is it really what you say in the end here? Note that because our energy improvements done in 2009, the 17% that you talked about, because they can't be counted, that's why we have such a big hurdle to meet. We're almost penalized because we've been so good. Is that
That's fair.
shorthand word?
The Noresco fellow today said that if we go ahead with this, we're going to be in the top handful of communities saving energy. There's only a few in that group, so.
So we're doing great things, we're just not doing green community level great things yet.
We're doing great things. We did them in the past, and it doesn't help us with the Green Communities application unless we do more.
Okay.
So the current baseline is what Green Communities cares about, not what it was 10 or
Right, so
12
that's
years ago.
when you tell someone why it's so hard for us to do it, it's because we're
Yeah,
already,
that's fair.
it's not much improvement. All right, thank you.
And again, just as a reminder, I think, and this is how I've explained it, in that much of the stuff that's listed on page 15, that,
Right.
that grid,
Yeah.
again, especially around the boilers, these were, and again, because boilers kind of skews all the numbers. But like if you look at boilers as in and of itself, that was already something that was going to have to be done at some point in time, nearer further than farther away. And pulling them in here skews your payback number, but that was already something that was targeted, for lack of a better.
Yeah, I'd say that those, I mean, Joe, you correct me, but the police station and the Parker HVAC stuff was the most urgent of any
Correct.
building. By adding it to this project, there's just benefits, whether it's cost savings or energy savings. But, the real nuts and bolts, which I put in the second paragraph of the next page, is that the 2 3/4 energy improvements, other than the boilers, are an 11.9-year payback.
Yep. Yep.
And when you do performance contracting, you like to have a payback less than your debt service time frame. So when we did it before, I think we pretty much pushed the envelope. I don't know that it was inside of 15 years, but I know it was plus or minus pretty low.
It was pretty close.
And this is, this is a almost 40-year debt service? Is it?
Everything that's 5 million will be 20 years.
Okay.
And that includes the 2 boilers or 2 buildings at 200 years.
Right. And then another question in your narrative, Bob, you talked about the fact that your staff is still looking at the applicability of stimulus funding. Is there more detail on whether that's feasible for this?
I don't remember. Did we ask? I don't remember asking you that.
No,
I asked you the other two.
You asked me the water tank,
Yeah, the
which
water and
absolutely
the
is
police
allowable.
station.
The health was kind of a stretch. I don't think we even discussed possibly using this.
Yeah, Sharon can look. Karen.
I hadn't even thought about this
Yeah,
project.
my guess is no. It's not related to the pandemic,
Okay.
even tangentially.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
grant is largely to kind of mitigate the results of the pandemic, so it doesn't relate right off the cuff to me. I could see them pushing back on us.
Yeah.
You want to kind of use the funds for things you're pretty sure they're not going to push back on. Something that they've outlined that is definitely a goal.
And again, just to restate it, I don't say much here because it's not really part of the article, but at the presentation, you'll see other things the town could do that are not here, but they should or could and should be discussed by the community, whatever they may be.
So, and maybe just on that point, so this one, we have the picture, that's, of this here. To that point, if there's other things that come out of this climate advisory, would that be a phase 3?
I think so.
Or you wouldn't kind of look to,
I was trying to put them together at first, and the idea of trying to get public feedback in a timely way, and our guarantee was going to expire in December. And we talked about, when last spring, trying to get public input, but we didn't know when the public would be able to meet again. So eventually, late in the summer, it just made sense to cut it in two and say, you know, let the public meet at its own convenience and at its pleasure to discuss this other stuff. It will not, as far as we know, anything discussed will not generate savings and help the green communities application per se. But it certainly could be, if you will, very much in the spirit of green communities. You know, and again, we'll just kind of see where it goes. I think this is a relatively simple concept. Whether people like it or not, I don't know. But I think that what else can we do becomes a much more involved, complicated discussion.
Yep.
Because there's lots of other things you could do, either in public space or public buildings, such as solar. RMLD has pretty much kept us in the loop with what's possible. They're doing a lot more, I will say, at the residential level than they are for commercial, but they're open-minded.
Do you have a question, Karen?
We have everybody else vote yes.
Do you have some, Joe? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, you go.
Do we know, like, for that amount of money, like the difference between like going out, say, 20 years versus 10? I know you're trying to align it to the payback as best as you can.
That's
Like
hard,
guys
that's
done
really
this.
hard to answer.
But just seeing based on like today's rates and.
Yeah, the interest rate would be different, but not earth-shaking. It's really a question of whether you want to pay it back faster or slower. And faster costs more. I mean, you're paying more principal every year than you otherwise could. Usually when we borrow money, you know, we're kind of known as borrowing for the shortest possible. You know, and aside from that, you kind of like to match the borrowing for the life of the asset. You certainly don't want to borrow for longer than an expected life would be of a piece of equipment or whatever it is. So for a water tank, technically, I don't know what's legal, don't yell at me, Sharon. You know, they're probably going to have a 50 to 75 life period, but we never borrow that long. For this equipment, we tried to line it up with the break even on what we're doing. You know, it's interesting that town meeting doesn't technically have the authority to specify the term of debt, and I don't either. The treasurer decides, but there's kind of an understanding. And that's because the treasurer's job is to go out in the marketplace when it happens and make the best deal possible for the town. So I would say the difference in interest costs would be relatively nominal, other than you're adding 5 more years of interest.
Yeah.
So that's significant. But the annual cost of interest would not be huge, like 10 grand or something.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. So earlier there was a question. So here's the thing about green communities, a requirement and bottom up. But it's a complicated program, and it's good to be able to describe it simply. So it requires us to have a plan to save 20% in energy over 5 years. There is no requirement anywhere that we spend money to do that. There's no, this is a big ask, and absolutely we're gonna get a lot of questions. So this is a plan, this is an option to meet a big chunk of that requirement that Bob's put together with Noresco. The Reading Climate Advisory Committee hasn't seen any of this yet, and this is kind of the first we're all seeing it. This is a big ask, I know that. The concern I have with this big ask, and I am looking forward, I'm glad, Bob, you mentioned they're gonna dive into that solar option because the payback's not bad, the savings are good, and MAPDC there can be there to explain why it doesn't qualify, because that doesn't make any sense. So we submit our application to green communities, and then we look forward to up to 200 every year for money that can be spent on projects like this, so it feeds itself. My concern with this particular selection and this option, I'm focused on the boilers, because the other thing that's going on that we haven't gotten yet is the climate law that was passed. And we don't have any policy in place yet to determine how we are going to reduce carbon emissions locally. So these boilers, correct me if I'm wrong, they're all gas fired?
Yes.
Okay, they're all gas fired. If this is, Bob's explained that this is gonna happen really quickly. We buy into this, it's all gonna be done we're locking up, we don't throw away gas boilers, we keep them forever. We're locked into a big level of natural gas usage for the next 20 years. What is the climate law? Like, 2030 is 2030, 2050. We're looking to get to net zero by then. So that's what I'm concerned about, like that line item in particular. So I'm looking for options, like phasing this in, because I understand that you can't, there's some systems that you're gonna have to deal with. And the LED lighting, clearly that looks like a chunky spend that we could get a lot of savings. And I know we're gonna see lots of changes. We're seeing changes in what RMLD is planning for their strategic initiatives, which is investing more in local solar, and we can work with them. And also, there are technological changes coming that give us options. So I have a concern with spending so much money to lock us into this, carbon emission, fossil fuel-based system across municipal buildings that we're gonna be locked into for 20 years. Or we have to throw them out and replace them before we.
My only question, and maybe Joe, you can answer this, but these are only two, wouldn't we have other boilers that would, and again, just, Karen, with all, kind of all due respect with that, but if we, if these were already, kind of earmarked, we may still be chasing that, I forget what you said as far as the law or whatever that's coming out there is from
The climate law.
The climate
where
law.
We need to reduce carbon emissions every year.
Yeah, but that's not gonna, I would think that's not, the intent is to hamstring communities into preventing, doing some of the ones, the replacements that they need to do.
No, and
Kind of today. So I guess my question for Joe then is, if there are other ones that are kind of, we could pivot and, kind of take that law into account for other boilers that kind of come off, kind of down the line, right?
Yeah, I can answer that based on today's discussion. Jody can certainly chime in. Right now, the profession suggests you do this for new construction or sort of significant renovation. If we were to, it's not just the cost of a boiler that's different, it's the whole piping of the whole system. As soon as you start getting into that level of change in a building, you're gonna trigger ADA and other requirements. So what I'm saying is, instead of just replacing boilers, suddenly you're gonna have a school renovation project on your hands.
So like we could
So
do this
for
for the
Killam, it's
Killam,
perfect,
right?
yeah, absolutely, and we discussed that today, he said, yeah, perfect timing.
So what I think I'm hearing is that this lumps all our boilers are gonna be updated if we spend this money.
It's just two buildings.
Two buildings.
How did that go? Didn't the Coolidge boiler cost
No.
like 200,000? Like, how did we go from 200,000 to 2 million?
All right, let me-
All of these.
Give the whole story.
Okay, so we'll talk about Coolidge. Coolidge Middle School has a system over there that has, the old part of the building is on steam heat. It's steam. To heat the new section of the building, which is hydronic, which is just like most people, I don't know if anybody has steam heat in their house, but forced hot water, we had what's called, we had a heat exchanger that would heat the back of the building. What you're talking about, the project that we just completed, was we took the heat exchanger out of the equation and put condensing gas-fired boiler in the back of the
I
building.
remember that.
Which
Yep.
is more energy efficient than
Yep.
using a heat exchanger and more reliable. So that's that. That's a much smaller scale project that we did, and I forget how much that came in at, but, it seems like.
Like a
sort of
couple
long.
100,000 versus
It
2
was,
million.
and it was in the, right. So now fast forward to what we're talking about doing now is going, for instance, like the Parker Middle School, those boilers are getting towards the end of their useful life. Now, could they last 5 more years? They probably could, but we're seeing a trend in spending more money at that location and his location at the PD. So the goal is to go with condensing boilers at Parker Middle School, which is what we have at the high school, right? We have two brand new condensing boilers, and our backup is actually from the construction project still in the building. You're gonna yield a much greater savings with the condensing boilers, was what we wanna install at both PD and Parker Middle School. I'll tell you that, like when they talk about like, I'll use the term electrification or air-sourced heat pumps for a school. It was me that brought that up in the meeting today, and Bob will tell you that, like, we've run into this before. You have to be very careful. If you spend over 20%, if you do work in a building that goes over 20% of the assessed value, it's a domino effect. All these code requirements. Now, most of the buildings are current as of. You're gonna end up bringing it up to code for seismic,
I know, I
ADA,
understand.
all that
So you're not
stuff.
talking about a new building, you're talking about renovating existing buildings, got it.
Correct, and what
Yeah.
I'm getting at is like, if you were to say, let's electrify this building and get rid of boilers completely, you gotta remember, you're dealing with buildings that are on the low side, 70,000 square feet, up to 375,000 square feet. It would be a huge project to do that, to provide individual heat pumps for each, even if you were to go with centralized systems, it would be a huge amount of money to do that, and that's why it came up that it would be something to really think about on a new building project,
Yeah, and the other thing it does, it takes away the use of the building, like you take away the use of the school while you're doing that kind of renovation.
It's very invasive
So
too.
just to be clear, $2 million, what do we get for that particular line item? Because I didn't read it correctly then, and I thought we were
It
getting
was-
lots of
it's-
boilers.
I don't have the sheet in front of me, but it's
Okay.
Parker Middle School,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah.
2 boilers at the Parker Middle School, and actually what we'd be getting rid of over there is, there's 2, I think they're Smith boilers, they're huge, each one of these boilers would probably take up this, one of them would take up this room. You go with the condensing boiler, which looks like basically like a giant refrigerator, probably put 3 of those in there. All right, that's what would go over there, and then the boiler is over at the PD for redundancy. We
Doing a chiller too, I think.
And the chiller at the PD, which is getting close to the end of its useful life.
And that was a separate line item, I think.
Yeah, it is, it's under air condensing, it's under.
It's all part of the 2 million.
It's correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I had no idea those cost that much.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate you being here to give that detail.
Yeah.
I just have a follow-up on that. So, Joe, I imagine you have relationships with facilities folks kind of across the area.
Yep.
The boilers we're talking about and the boilers we have in existing schools, are those pretty standard for the
So-
age of the buildings we've got?
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at Reading as a whole, like the condition of our buildings, contractors love to come work for the town of Reading because we take good care of our equipment and we're funded properly to do so. Our equipment, we have, I wouldn't say it's a luxury, but if something breaks, we fix it. We don't let it sit there, everything, there's a work order goes in, something gets taken care of. It's targeted on the capital plan. We try to make sure when we replace stuff, to answer your question, that it's systems that we can work on and that a lot of people can work on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So we try not to go with something that's a total, like a proprietary system that nobody else can touch. So we try to go with like systems in buildings as we replace stuff. And that could be any fire alarm, boilers, you name it.
I think what I'm getting at is Karen's concern is a good one, that the state could change some law and require that the town have all new equipment, but it feels to me that that would not be a Reading problem. That would be municipalities
That'd be a
across the
statewide
state
problem.
would
I wouldn't
be.
see that happening. but-
No, me neither, but I think the pushback you would, even if it did, I think you're gonna see it. You've got the MMA and all sorts of organizations that are pushing back, so it doesn't feel like, I'm not overly concerned about it, I just wanted to know if I should be.
Yep.
Yeah, and the other responsibility we have is we're responsible, Joe's responsible to do a lot of the maintenance on the energy equipment in order to fulfill the guarantee that Ameresco has with us now.
Right.
So if we let stuff fall into disrepair, they would stop guaranteeing the savings.
Right.
Part of what they do every year is they do what's called measurement and verification. And what they'll do is, and we just went through it a month ago, actually, they actually come to my office, they sit on the energy management system and they go through it, and then they look, and then they ask me for repair records. And they want to make sure that are you maintaining this piece of equipment, because they guarantee a savings, but if you're not maintaining your equipment, there's no guarantee.
Yeah,
So it's important to remember that, that's an important piece of it.
thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions on Article 6?
Seven's the water tank, the lake-breaking battery story of the financial forum. So the ask is now 2.5, now 1.5 million. I had about a dozen emails or conversations after the financial forums. Interestingly, everyone wanted to move ahead with the project, which I was really torn on.
Goes up again.
Yeah, exactly. And then a number of people said this would be a good candidate for the federal funds. So I gave you a plan to start the discussion. I have no vested interest where you go with that. I understand there's lots of ways to look at it. You don't want to rush. You don't want to bump something out that might have been otherwise done. But, you know, where a number of people, 2/3 of the people that said go ahead and do it, said we think you should use federal funds. So I said, all right, I'll throw it in there as an idea. Again, at the, Sharon may have to finesse this, but at the October town meeting, we don't think, we're not sure, water reserves and free cash will be certified. So the motion on town floor, which does have to be specific, could be 2.5 million of debt. If free cash and reserves are then available in November, I'm not sure what the reaction could be to change that. I think there's an article for that. So for instance, if you wanted to use, the way it's written, the article can't do anything. But the motion on the floor has to be very specific. It has to say 2 million of this, 500,000 of that, whatever it may be. The way all the debt articles are written, because we had to check with bond counsel just to make sure. He said, yeah, if you wanted to use any of the federal grant money, the way you worded the articles would have accommodated that. But clearly, the motion on town floor that has to be approved eventually by town meeting has to be specific. So what I'm saying is that, you know, and I think I said this in the writing, it'd be good if you gave town meeting some guidance, but it can change. Town meeting will ultimately do whatever it wants. It's legal. Sharon may have to write it in. So we're not sure that town meeting can use water reserves on October 18th.
So I did reach out to our DOR rep to see, is this a timeline that you could handle? And I'd have to get it into them within the next week or so.
Okay.
She's actually our rep who certifies our free cash is actually going on vacation October 12th to the, so during that time frame. So she'd have to get it done before. So if we could get it into her, it's possible. She did say that there have been a lot of changes and it's hard to know how many other people will need it, but usually it's a later town meeting than October, so we might be able to get it. They'll probably prioritize us first. It's a matter of getting, they ask for a lot of information to certify our free cash. It's not a small deal. So we're already starting to look at it. So hopefully we can get it certified, because then it gives you more options of how we proceed with this article, how you break it out. If you want to do some certified surplus, some federal funding, if you're not comfortable with that being all federal funding, or you didn't want to necessarily authorize any other debt. The other thing that I was looking up regarding debt for the federal funding is you can't use it for debt that's already existing after March 3rd, 2021. So we would have to borrow something, because we already borrowed for the water tank.
Well, we borrowed 4.5, but we're gonna borrow another 2.5,
So
in
we
theory, that
could,
be.
but we
That's good.
can't pay any debt issuance costs or anything like that. They don't feel like that's helpful
Yep.
for what they're trying to do, but they would.
Okay.
So we have options, we have some flexibility. We could transfer into this fund, to cover the debt service specifically for the water tank, so that we can see that that's, an item.
So the way this could work is, if you're interested, we could ask town meeting for 2.5 million in debt and borrow 2.5 million. And then every year, until whenever the limit is for the federal fund, the select board as water commissioners could say, well, they have to ask town meeting, but this is how we intend to pay for it. And the motion every year at town meeting for the budget would say, Water Enterprise Fund, $6 million to be funded by ratepayer money plus $1 million of reserves plus $1 million of ARPA, whatever it is. So in theory, if you wanted to, again, up to the 5 years, you could use X number of dollars each year to help pay for the debt service, either from reserves and or federal money. And that's the way it's kind of done now with reserves, but more on a loose.
How long would we borrow for, though, because the grant would be over in 5 years?
15, probably.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to use it long term.
I was thinking of 10, but really 15 makes more sense, because this is all water ratepayer money. This is not like a zero-sum game in the general fund.
I'd like to have the certified surplus certified for October if we can, hopefully. We're gonna try really hard, because it is very early for DOR. They were not pleased to hear that we're looking for that date. But if we have that,
Took vacation.
I know, taking vacation right then, that seemed like a weird time, but, and they're shorthanded. I mean, years ago, they kind of downsized their staff, so it's been taking a long time to get free cash certified, and then sometimes they halfway through are switching and doing tax rate setting, and so sometimes we're waiting. If you didn't need free cash for November, they kind of push you aside and say, we'll deal with you after we're done with your base rate setting. And so, and that's kind of forced, because that's the level of staffing that they have, so.
Maybe I should have asked this in the last financial forum, but I'm not clear, with this ARPA money, who is the deciding authority on how to spend it?
We're not clear either. Some have suggested I am, and I don't want to be.
I mean, because I mean, it might, I understand, you know, per our charter, town meeting has to decide, you know, when you spend more than X on something.
Right.
But if this, you know, the school committee is meeting right now, and they may have their own idea of plans for several million of it, and we've got these plans, but who, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's
A
a
board or a
discussion.
person.
That's a discussion you all started to have at the last meeting that needs to continue, is how does the community spend money? You know, does the schools get this much, the town get this much? Is there some process to allocate the money or just to decide priorities? That's a community discussion as far as I can see, not even so much before it gets to town meeting. You know, I think all the elected boards and you need to put your heads together and come up with a process that makes sense.
But there's not one board, like not town meeting or select board or FinCom to say.
That's
I would
done
say
typically.
ultimately town meeting.
Town meeting
Town
would
meeting,
be,
yeah.
would be a way to get information, but they never normally, I would say, we don't bring grants typically to town meeting for
Right.
their authorization of how to spend a grant. Usually it's more clear cut what the grant is for, and we just move with it. This is giving us choices, so it would be something that would be nice that town meeting could chime in on, but I don't know that that's what they were thinking in terms of
Yeah.
who decides. I think they want the community to come together and find a way to agree upon what the needs are and just have a plan in place and move forward with that plan. So it could be putting together some sort of committee that's, you know, so many members of school committee and so many members of FinCom or so many members of select board, just to kind of come to an agreement of what do we think the major need is and what would be the highest priority items for us to aim to use this money for. So that we can come to an agreement and all be kind of having that open conversation so that we're not fighting over the money necessarily, although that still could happen.
What I was thinking is all the grants we've gotten all along, was it the command team who decided how to spend it? I mean, we've got, this isn't the first
You mean
COVID kind of.
COVID?
Yeah,
The
we've
schools got
other-
specific grants for the schools, and so a lot of the CARES money kind of went through us.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so they could put something through, the school department could put something through. We were all kind of just focused on response in the beginning for sure. PPE and things like that
Yeah.
were things that we knew we had to do when we were all doing it, and then seeing where we could put it after. And then all these grants came available for school department, and so they, in order to use their money, they were starting to just put their stuff right to their school grant. But the CARES grant would allow for anything that was COVID related to go there. But you know, with all the money that was out there, we just didn't know what bucket are we putting it in. Because
Yeah.
FEMA's like, we'll give you a little bit of money, and CARES will give you a little bit of money, and the
Yeah.
school department's getting money from CARES, and it was a lot.
Pre-COVID, you applied for a grant based on you knowing what you want. This is money coming in that is just helping. So as the chief procurement officer, I was the one that's supposed to sign off on grants in the schools. It was more than 25,000, I think. But I wasn't about to disagree with them. I just had to sign it because the school committee, you know, decided this is what we're applying for. And we're showing you on the school committee, remember, you know, 5-year history of teacher grants or whatever.
Yeah.
This is very different, that it's money coming in without a clear use. And so who decides the use? We've never had to do that way. We've always applied for something, we being the town as a whole, with a big T. So this is different.
And also, it'd be easier if it had to be spent in 1 year. Pacing it out, that
5
just
years is
mix the
hard, yeah.
plans, we don't know
Yeah.
what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I've asked different other towns and different folks in this building, and Karen, why don't we keep calling you Karen? Maybe it's
I don't know, because Karen's sitting behind me.
And, you know, some of it, they're saying, it's you, but I'm not doing that, I'm not gonna decide. But the town manager has to ultimately sign for it, which I think is really the point.
Yeah.
The town manager's never decided for the school committee what grants they want to apply for. I just had to legally sign it as the authority. So it's just different. never had quite this issue before, and it's a good issue to have, certainly. But we don't have a built-in mechanism set up for how, 7 million, how do we spend it?
So Bob, you answered a question I had in a way I didn't want to hear, which is, I wanted to hear, is there precedent for this? Like you said, there really isn't, which is an opportunity for sure, but it's a challenge. And the only other thing I wanted to add, I like the concept a lot of a more kind of collaborative approach, and some good conversations with different stakeholders. But the only thing I'll add is the importance of staff. Because those stakeholders you mentioned might get together and say, aha, we know exactly what we want to do, and everyone is on the same page, and if we don't talk to our town accountant, who says, actually, the grant doesn't cover that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you want to have that
For
kind of
sure,
back
I would
and
be involved, yeah.
yeah, and not only for the kind of technical stuff, but also the, like, you know, you want that collaboration, right? You want staff to buy in to, they are the experts on the ground who know what we need and who know the impact.
The last thing I want is to say, oh yeah, I think that's gonna be covered, and then we put it through and they're like, mm-mm. And it's a
Exactly.
couple $1 million or something, I don't wanna go to town meeting. I want us to be having that conversation before we decide to do anything, so.
Absolutely. So,
And I think that also goes, you know, to Dean's point, that goes to understanding across the community. You know what I mean? And I think that's, you know, and also the importance to have, you know, kind of, not, you know, a representative, you know, kind of, folks from select board, from school committee, from FinCom, from staff, obviously, the two of you, you know, from a staff perspective, to be able to make sure that you're not leaving anything to, you know, you're not ignoring any one fact. And then, you know, that body, or, you know, and that's what I would advocate for, you know, personally. I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, we've been in a very fortunate position, in that the town and the schools have worked so well together for so long. The last thing you want to now is start a rift over fighting over a pocket of money. And so I think from that perspective, you want to be able to, you know, handle this in the spirit in which it is, you know, kind of granted, in that it's going to, you know, under the umbrella of COVID, impact the community, and, you know, and how you, and again, I think there's a lot of folks that have well thought out plans and thoughts for it, but that should be kind of looked at from that
I do think, you know, other staff members, aside from me, are gonna have more input into what they see the impacts are amongst different
That's
groups.
what-
Like
that's
people
what-
who
yeah,
work
that's
with the
what-
seniors, or people who are working with people that are struggling, you know, things that I'm not privy to, I wouldn't know what our major concerns are. So the more people that are staff members that are directly related to some of these areas we're looking at, whereas are there people that are out there that are struggling with, you know, the possibility of being homeless, or the possibility of not having enough food, or when the winter comes, not having utilities.
Yep.
Things like that. People don't call me, I'm not aware, but the people who
Sure.
work with those people directly need to be kind of involved in those conversations.
I think that's the.
Because
yeah.
I wouldn't know, is that a problem that we're really having here at a high level, or do we have a different sort of?
Well, and I think that there has to be that level of introspection for the town. You can't use, you know, another town's proxy either. You have to, you know, again, this is for Reading to be decided upon by Reading. And-
Yeah, like when they're saying broadband access, where they're saying that that was a problem, that there were people who could not effectively work remotely because their internet access was just not fast enough, or the school was harder for kids because it was too slow. I don't know what our internet access looks like. I don't live in Reading. I don't know if people had struggles. So
Right.
that's the kind of conversation. It could even be some community involvement to help you get there, to say, I struggled tremendously trying to do my stuff from home, or not.
I mean, my Wi-Fi sucks. But I think that's just my problem. I'm not very technical, but no, at least that's what my kids told me.
But it's definitely an opportunity for us to solve some of the issues
Right.
that were identified as part of the pandemic, but
Yeah.
making sure we're talking to all the right people to get to what are the biggest issues we're seeing.
And I think the other thing, I'm sorry about, my last, you know, kind of piece of it, is that I really enjoyed hearing in the forum that there's no urgency. And I think that is, you know, again, I don't want the opposite of it, whereas it's 5 years from now when we haven't figured out how to do anything.
Right.
But the not having, you know, kind of, you know, the sense of urgency that it has to be done super quickly, that you don't rush the decision, you don't the person that speaks the loudest or speaks first, is the first one in the queue. I mean, I think that's, there's some benefit to that, and it should lead us to have a, kind of a methodology to kind of come together to be able to do
We
it.
could even survey some of the community, the way they're doing with parking, because I think our last forum was the night before school started, and I think that was gonna limit the participation of people that watched it, that had it on their radar, that even know this money exists. And
The
people
survey
may
might
have
be
a
a
lot.
really good way to get input about what people think they're seeing as a result of the pandemic.
And Jean, you were saying, you wish there was more of a precedent, and there really is. And think about how the override was discussed in the past. The big difference is this is one-time money. Think about how it was built from the ground up. First, staff was asked, what are the things you need in a budget? All the ideas were thrown out, both from the town and the school sides, and each side debated on their own, how much should we ask? And then as a group, everyone got together. Now, one of the big differences, aside from one-time money, is the select board decides, as opposed to it's really a community discussion, if you will. But that framework got a lot of ideas out there and discussed over a period of several months, actually a couple of years, because it failed the first time.
I really like that analogy. And what I really like about it too is after the decision was made, there was a lot of feelings about what was or wasn't included, but I believe there was a fair amount of trust in the process. So it was sort of, I wish X, Y, or Z had been funded, or I don't know why they included that, but I get how the decision was made.
Yep.
And I think that's important.
But also in that case, when the first one failed, I think the survey yielded some important information
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
made better focus the second go around.
Yeah, to go back to the water tank project, we live in this neighborhood, and this project has gone on for a number of years. It predated COVID by a number of years. It's gotten somewhat contentious at times, but we appreciate that staff has kept us apprised of all the developments. The most recent comparison of replacement costs and maintenance costs was in 2016. And Bob has mentioned that, things like paint have certainly increased, as have steel and all other costs. But I think it's important, in the spirit of assessing this demand on ARPA funds in the context of all of our other needs in town, to have an updated comparison of maintenance and replacement, so that we can really assess what the best next step is for the useful life of this tank, whether it's the one that's there now or a new one. So that's something I think is important for context here. I think, and again, I expect the paint, is increasing quite a bit as well, but I think it's something we need to reassess.
Yeah, what
Just
would,
to be clear, what you're saying is don't do this project until you do this work. And that's at least what I heard.
I'm saying that if the comparison in 2016 was that replacement was a better deal for the town than maintenance, is that still the case?
It's a very complicated answer, as you'd expect.
Yeah.
I did get from the town engineer a week or so, I think you asked me this question before, and after you did, he said painting has gone up by over $2 million. So whatever the break even was before, it's different, but its order of magnitude, it's not different. Both sides have gone up an enormous amount.
Sure. Yeah.
This avoids taking stuff off the equipment off the tank every 15 years, or however you're supposed to do it, 10 years. It avoids not just the cost, but the interruption to communication in the town and for residents. And you're gonna have to be building a temporary tower, say, every 15 years. This time you do it once. So, several years ago, boards had discussions, had different conclusions. One of the boards concluded they wanted a permanent tower. The town meeting funded a permanent
Right.
tower.
Right.
And then the neighbors came in at a meeting and they said, wait a minute, you didn't really talk to us. I was in the hospital, so I only heard this secondhand. So I said, all right, hold on. We need to do a full analysis. Just because we thought we knew and the board thought they knew what the right outcome was, someone else is now talking. So the break even was not just math, but it was also future operations and inconvenience, I guess, let's say. That with a new tank, the equipment's not coming off again unless it's needing to be replaced on its own merit. If you needed to do maintenance every 15 years, it was gonna come off every 15 years years and a tank, and this tower had to be built.
Yeah, and I also think that to some extent implicates the question of the useful life, not only of the water tank, but of those antennas. You know,
Yeah.
what is the state of wireless telecommunications
Yeah.
in 10 or 15 years? Where will those macro sites that are up on that tank right now, will they be needed in 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, and there's no obvious answer to that. We asked those questions along the way in this room with a lot of the vendors.
Right.
And I was surprised at the answers that, you know, they said whatever the micro technology is, had nothing to do with what they needed up there. That they needed a certain amount of these, especially along 12893, I'm sorry, 2893. And that all the other technology in terms of locating smaller technology
Yeah.
around town was unrelated to that, which
Yeah.
surprised me. And then in terms of the size, I always was taught the technology got smaller and cheaper over time.
Right.
And their equipment is not getting smaller. It's
Yeah.
probably getting cheaper, but not smaller.
Yeah, I agree, and the macro antennas are definitely getting bigger as we went from like 3G to 4G.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, in 10 or 15 years, I suspect they will still need those macro sites on towers or on water tanks, but I imagine the calculus and the kind of the
Yeah.
balance among carriers with those macro sites and the small cells that we hear so much about might be different. And, you know, again, I just think that updated information would be necessary for us to make a good decision about whether to authorize this replacement.
And if you remember the presentation given on the board, I think they called it an interruption study or an interruption map. In 15 years, they may be able to cover that. So
Right.
that the main equipment has to go down for a period, but they've got so much else around town, they can accommodate that more easily. So yeah, it may not be as difficult as it is now, but it's gonna be an issue still, I think.
So what would be the impact? It sounds, I have the same reaction you did. It sounds like what you're saying is, I don't know what the technical Robert's rules is, but tabling or not moving forward with this until this additional information.
And if you do that.
We're not doing this in the next 2 weeks, is what I'm saying.
Well, I was gonna say, we have to rebid the project.
So that's what, I kind of want to work through like, what would be the implications of this? So what's the cost of doing a study like this? What's the cost of putting off the project? We should talk about that too, because while I agree getting good data is important, but if there's an enormous cost for something that we're already 75% into, I'd want to understand that too.
Yeah, the issues you'd have to deal with immediately are, we've already signed an agreement with the telecom companies. Someone's gonna build a temporary tower. That would have to be theoretically put on, I don't know exactly how, damages would be or whatever. Then you'd have to assess whatever you're going to do instead of this path. Figure out what that costs, what the time is. I mean, the town engineer can tell you a lot of this anecdotally, but it's not formally. And then you would have to rebid it, because the bids are only good through, I want to say, very early November, not even November town meeting, because we thought it'd be a September town meeting when they put the bid.
So the bid right now is 2.5 over
Yes.
what we had hoped. And the risk is you take a pause to get this additional information.
The 2.5 includes contingency. The actual bid is a smaller number, but the whole project grew by $2.5 million.
How big is it now, Bob? The whole
Seven.
project? 7?
Can you give me an idea of timeframe? Like how many
Next spring town meeting.
next springtime meeting we'd have this information?
Well,
And could
in
have it-
advance, but next spring town meeting would probably look at an article, and then the question is, you authorized that before or after you know the bid? Bidding is always subject to funding, and everyone knows that, but when there's only one bidder, it's a little harder to get a competitive situation. So it's complicated. I know, based on what the town engineer told me, that the break-evens are different, but the order of magnitude is not. You know, if one side of the equation went up $2 million every 15 years, and this went up $2.5 million total, well, that's not fair, because it wasn't the same math. It's not gonna change the conclusion. It might change the break-even from, I think we figured before it was between 2 and 3 times of doing a 15-year project, this would pay for that. Now maybe it's between 3 and 4. So between 45 and 60 years instead of between 30 and 45 years. Although they suggest every 10 years, we were doing it every 15. So it may have changed the break-even, and I don't know, I'm pushing it out conservatively, it may not have. but it's not gonna say, oh, eureka, we would have never done this if we had done it, because prices on both sides.
So Bob, is this a comparison of the maintenance to the cost of a new one versus, I thought in the last meeting I heard the 2 pipes coming in now and the other tank that we really don't need this one? So is that, like, is there a third choice here of just getting rid of it and we don't need it?
That's a whole different discussion. In theory, you don't need a water tank in a community. In theory, you can rely on the MWRA in our case. In practice, it's a huge discussion. We had always been discussing with the MWRA for 15 years our likely desire to get rid of the Bear Hill tank, not this one. Because the Bear Hill tank is something that, in a location that the MWRA had interest in for their water storage. So there's no automatic reason a community must have a water tank, some don't. If the fire chief were here, and if he's watching right now, he's coming here. He wants a water tank to fight fires. He doesn't want to have to rely on whatever the MWA may have on him. He wants to be able to put out a fire, a big fire.
So is the Alberta Street tank then town, it's
Yes.
limited, it's reserved for
Only town.
town where Bear Hill is?
No,
MWRA?
Bear Hill's the same, it's only town
Only
use,
town,
but we
okay.
could spare that one, if you will. And, you know, it's interesting with the pandemic, not to go too long for those of you that are interested in leaving, the water use patterns around town changed tremendously, and our whole system became unbalanced or differently balanced. So the engineers have to constantly, and the water staff have to constantly balance the chemicals in the water to make it safe for everyone. So as the consumption habits changed and everyone stayed home, they had to react to that. Once upon a time before the pandemic, Bear Hill was definitely something you could get rid of from a water system standpoint. I can't say that as confidently now, I haven't asked that in the last year. Whereas the one by your house was much more integral to the balance of the whole system, if you will. The challenge we had was getting water to the northern section of town. That's why you wanted that more in the center. Because it comes from Stone, from the south.
Are the communities without a water tank similar in size to us, or are they much smaller?
Usually smaller.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this article?
Bob, so
Oh, yeah,
this
okay.
article, what is it doing as far as, you know, the water tank? Is it recommending the 2.5?
It's authorizing an additional $2.5 million of debt or other source of funds. Allowing
And some of it is to
project.
use, are we mentioning using the ARPA funds or not?
Possible.
That's up to,
Open-ended.
it's up to the town meeting ultimately, but it's also up to you to make a recommendation at town meeting. And I think that is something that you should decide tonight if you can.
Yeah. I mean, my initial thought on, you know, just on the funding part of the article, you know, not the go or don't go piece of it, but on the funding side of it, I'd feel more comfortable with just that. Just in light of just what we were talking about with ARPA just a few minutes ago. You know, again, this one is like, you know, just because Bob's in the room with us, you know, and I know this is not the case, that jumps the line. You know, I mean, you know, at least from that perspective, if we're going to have or try to come up with a methodical, you know, approach to this, then that should apply to even the things that are right in front of us, even though we know that we can. You know, it's good to have that option to be able to do it, at least, again, this is my opinion. But, you know, it's leaving us the possibility that we still can, even if we do it, you know, if we do it just with debt. I would just rather, I'd feel more comfortable saying, not using ARPA, you know, out of the gate. You know, knowing that we still have it as an option, but again, I think that might just, I don't know, you know, I think it might just send the wrong message. You know,
Because we were gonna do the tank anyway, even without the funding. And so you try to say, well, what is the COVID impact of this? You understand it's infrastructure that the funding covers, and other than, the COVID impact was the increase in the cost of steel, probably.
Yeah.
But we may have other more significant impacts,
Yeah,
I guess, without doing.
that's exactly the point. I just think it's, it's worthy, this is part of the discussion, you know, but that's, we still need the community discussion. And obviously, this is a big part of it, and again,
The community can tell us differently. if they
exactly,
feel
the
differently.
community can say, what the, why didn't you do it? Or, yeah, of course not, we should not, you know, I mean, but, you know, in light of X, Y, and Z, you shouldn't, or between X, Y, and Z, you should. You know, that's, I think that's what we should be doing with this. And again, my opinion, sorry.
You can also change it later at another, you know, once you've had a formal discussion, you could say, well, we haven't borrowed yet, let's
Well, that's
decide not to
fine.
borrow as much.
We're gonna borrow.
But if you borrow the 2.5, we can still
You can
use
pay
it
debt
towards
service.
the debt service.
See, we could use it if we run into tight times in the future and we still have this money. We could say, look, in 2 years, we could pay off some
It
of this.
doesn't mean we don't use any
Yeah,
extra funding,
it's
it's just we're delaying how much and we're determining what the priorities are.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't know if this, you know, if it's the case that having it spelled out, you know, from a debt authorization versus ARPA versus water reserves makes it, you know, kind of a different discussion as far as approval or not. That you know, that, I think that in of itself is probably something separate. But again, I think from a recommendation perspective, you can still talk to that it's available to you down the road.
Yep.
It's just, you know, not on the table.
Yeah, and I think even though money's important and you're a finance committee, I think Gene said the most important thing was not to disrupt the town-school relationship over anything.
That was me.
That was actually,
That was me. Don't take all the good things. Gene says a lot of good things.
I was
I'm crying out loud.
Gene's voice.
What's the mask? The mask hides everything.
That's the thing you can't afford to jeopardize,
Yeah.
as far as I can see.
For sure.
Great
Thank you
idea.
for the idea, Gene.
I try.
Well, probably too, I mean, if people have survived, well, a lot of people may feel, well, the COVID impact was probably bigger on the schools with all of the remote learning and lost learning and need for technology, so people will look at what was the most significant, and then also to our seniors, so we may want to just try to address that, and I don't think, the community may want, like, take this funding and have it be the same split as all the other budget money too.
Who knows?
That's a conversation for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts, you know, and again, that was, you know, that was just my thing on our
How do we
bill.
vote on our preference for the money then? That isn't an article.
So,
Recommend.
oh, yeah,
Recommend the
yeah.
debt.
Yeah, how do we?
I don't know what, is
Yeah,
that a
you
new
can-
motion you craft?
You
or-
can go back and now vote on articles, and you can do it now, or you can just wait till you vote on this article.
And just do a motion to revise that
Yeah,
language.
we can amend it. We
Okay.
can amend it at that point.
Just say source of funds.
So the only revision then on the table is for the source of funds, not to Article 7.
I think anyone can make any motion they want.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we have any others to go through, or was that the last?
No, I mentioned that the last article was added in case the select board wants to authorize or, exercise that right of first refusal.
Oh, Article
But
9?
yeah, you're not in any position, they haven't decided to discuss it yet, so you can't do anything until they decide.
That's got a time frame on it.
Well, was there an RMLD thing? What was there, was there something from RMLD as far as putting up, chargers and stuff like that? And they wanted to do by the winter?
Yeah, that was a possibility, and town council and RMLD worked together, and I'm not sure I'm gonna use the right word, but it's gonna be a license instead of a lease, which doesn't have to go to town.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that people knew I was paying attention on stuff like that. I read
Very,
that
very good
somewhere.
job, Gene.
I'm making a lot of points tonight.
You are.
I have a question on something I'm not seeing either, the vocational school debt.
November,
So
Next one.
not to be discussed today, okay.
well, no, we'll go over it quickly after this, but nothing to vote on tonight.
Okay.
Well, so, was there anything on 9?
No, you can't, I mean,
Any questions from anybody? Oh, well,
the board hasn't discussed it yet, but if it's not on the warrant, they can't do it. And they'll decide tomorrow night whether they want it on the warrant or not.
Okay.
This is a question for Bob. Bobby had mentioned our water reserves, sorry, going back to the water tank. The water reserves fund's pretty healthy with like 6 million.
Mhm.
So you suggest that they're just 500,000? Is there a plan or trajectory for that reserve?
Well, there's two parts. One is it may or may not be available to use in October because of the DOR.
Okay,
you have been using close to $1 million a year to offset costs for rates. So whether you have to call out something separately for a project or just bake it into the rates is ultimately your choice. You could use $2 or $3 million in a year. It'd be a little risky with only 6, but you could do it.
When we're having that conversation with town meeting, it might be helpful to talk about that as well.
Yeah. Well, and again, it depends if that's an option to be used on October, then we'll have it. And if DOR hasn't certified free cash, we can't discuss it anyways. It's just gonna fall into the ARPA discussion, which is at some point, it's an annual discussion with the budget.
Thank you.
All right, so we're back to Article 3. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion for Article 3, unless there's any more discussion on Article 3.
I think we can discuss even after the motion.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
so move to approve Article 3 as written.
Second.
Thanks, Eric. So discussion on Article 3. Discussion?
Have to do roll
Jeff,
And I got it.
Jeff, far away, Lynn.
Jeff, did you have a question?
No, I'm just scrolling through the PDF on my computer at the same time I'm zooming on the computer.
All right, so then we have to do this via roll call vote. I'll start with you, Jeff.
Yes,
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and Ed, yes, that's 8-0. And do we,
That's RCTV. You're having the same format of town meeting as the last couple. So do you want to do all the reports, Gene?
I agree, Jean should do all the reports. You're absolutely right.
I thought it was kind of efficient.
It did such a wonderful job.
Yeah, I did a great job. Yeah, I'm fine doing the reports, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, it's another reason to long for town meetings in person, where we can get information from underneath this.
Did you ask him the score?
No. It was a Bruins game to win, but wrong season.
Oh, that's, I thought we were hearing CPDC or something. I
Right.
didn't realize it was watching TV.
Possible.
Perfect. All right, so then Article 4, right? That's, yeah. We have a motion for Article 4.
Move to approve Article 4 as written.
Second.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Any discussion on Article 4? Not appearing. We'll go to the roll call vote. Jeffrey,
yes,
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and yes, 8-0. The lines don't keep it track, I don't even know why we're doing that. Yeah. All right, so then we go on to
5, 6, and 7.
5. All right, my paper. So 5. And so 5 is
Police expansion.
police expansion, okay.
Yeah, move to approve Article 5 as written.
Thanks, Jean.
Second.
Thanks, Mark. Any discussion on Article 5? Not appearing. We'll move to the vote. I'll start with Jeffrey,
yes,
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and yes. 8-0. All right, Article 6, which is performance contract. Almost had it. Motion on Article 6.
Move to approve Article 6 as written.
Second.
Thanks, Mark. Any discussion on Article 6? Not appearing, go to the vote. Jeffrey,
yes,
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Ed, yes. All right, on to Article 7, which is water tower.
Move to approve Article 7 as written.
Second?
Okay, any discussion on Article 7?
I'd like to move, and I'm gonna need a little bit of help from Bob, who's more experienced in this than I do. I'd like to move to reword Article 7 to indicate that the entire amount of $2.5 million is to be debt, with narrative that explains flexibility in the future, particularly around ARPA, but at this point anticipates debt.
And water reserves too, I mean. and
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
you know,
thank
you
you,
know,
and water reserves, yeah.
I mean, there's other funding sources, but,
Is that an adequate motion?
Yeah, I think as a practical matter, depending on the timing, we're 99% likely to borrow 2.5 extra million. And then the real discussion is, how do you pay for the costs of that with these other sources of funds? And there's no urgency of that decision, it's an annual decision, if you will,
Okay.
as part of the annual budget.
so,
Second, sorry. Jean needed a second.
for the amendment?
Yes.
Gotcha, thanks, Eric. So just a quick point, so I know we have this extra meat to the background on the article. So would Article 7 just be written as that first paragraph there, where it doesn't say the funding source?
Yeah, this was for you.
Yeah, right.
All these were for you, and they
Yep.
would clearly all be rewritten once you've decided what you want to do. And
So-
that's what goes to town meeting.
And so, yeah, so then in that article, would be put in front of the town meeting.
I
would
see no
it-
reason to discuss ARPA.
Right, but it would say in 2.5 at debt.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
That's.
Does FinCom get to say how to word this, or is this the select board decides what goes on the warrant, and FinCom just decides yes or no, whether we support it?
The warrant article, you're not changing the words of the article. The article can allow for this discussion and these decisions. You're making a recommendation at town meeting of how to execute the warrant article language, what details to use. And you're saying, you know, it allows for debt, it allows for grants, whatever. You're saying we suggest all debt, and then town meeting will ultimately decide what they think.
So when FinCom is asked to give their report, someone will go up and say, on our meeting of September 13th, FinCom recommended that we fund this $4.5 million or $2.5 million in this way,
Yep.
and go to 800.
Yes, and that's the way the whole article will be written for town meeting. They won't see any other choices.
Did you say the background will be amended to
Yes.
include that? So that'll be where they see it, because they
Yep.
get the.
Yeah, there's too much
warrant.
noise in there for town meeting. So,
Yeah, and yeah, so that would, that would be, the little color that, Jeffrey, to your point, that I would add, when we discussed this, we went through, kind of X, Y, and Z, and then we made this recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to kind of go half a step further, the select board has the right to include or not include any article, and then to word any article as they wish. But how to pay for the water tank is not necessary as part of that wording, if you will.
Okay.
So really, if the select board has a different opinion than you, it wouldn't matter in terms of how to pay for it, in terms of what they were going to do tomorrow. They can decide to do it, not do it. The language is adequate for everything that's been discussed, so that the language wouldn't need to change. And then separately, as a board, although they haven't done it in several years, the board occasionally used to vote on what their recommendations were on the contents of articles. Not just closing the article and letting town meeting decide, but they would say, the select board votes such and such. You are required to do that by the charter as FinCom, the board is not. In the past, again, if the board wanted to, we've put a select board vote, as part of the background. But I think that hasn't been done in 5 years or so. And it was only done for 3 or 4 years.
Any more discussion on Jean's amendment? All right, so let's vote first on the amendment. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Jackie?
No.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and Ed, yes. 7-1. All right, so then, so that passes, and then, so now we need to vote on, or any more discussion or any other amendments on Article 7. Amendment 7. No, Article 7. Article 7, sorry. Article 7. All right, none appearing, so then we'll vote,
Yes, I do, there's a motion on the floor for
Yeah,
the
there's a
article.
motion.
there we go. That's what I like, that's what we need to hear, Jim. Perfect, so we'll move to a vote on Article 7. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Jackie,
No.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
and yes, 7-1 on Article 7. And then that's all of them for the October town meeting, right?
Yeah, and I can go very quickly through November. There's a capital plan article. Right now, we have nothing to change, but it's all been done in October. We have a budget amendment. Again, nothing is planned right now. Everyone would have been done in October. There's an addition of a prior year's bills that Sharon will need done, and November was just more convenient than October. We have 2 prior year's bills.
Just one,
Just one. Oh, that's right.
like $55.
Yeah, a couple years ago. There'll be a zoning bylaw that you don't have to vote on. Then there is the Northeast Metropolitan School District, of which I expect, either they or I need to give you a presentation on the 30th. It's a pretty important vote. And then the last one is a petition bylaw that you don't have to vote on. So right now, it's really the Voc School and anything else that changes what the prior year bills. And then anything else that changes based on the capital plan or the budgets that we don't know today, but we might know, on the 30th. Did you know of anything?
Really, no, nothing another month, that doesn't mean there isn't anything.
So, in a way, this is a simpler town meeting, I think, but zoning and general bylaws don't always fast.
And we're still slated to have the financial, so the town meeting on the 18th and the financial forum on the 20th?
Is that right? I can't
I'm gonna go with yes.
October, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
October,
October.
so,
Can you repeat those, Nate?
It's a busy week.
remember. Yeah, if the 18th is a Monday, that's the special town meeting if it's just one night. The 20th, yes, that's right, the 20th is the financial forum.
20th is the forum, yeah.
And then if you need a second night of town meeting, it'd be Thursday, the 21st. And the objective, the moderator, is to hold a Zoom town meeting, but also to have the Performing Arts Center available to anyone who wants to use it. So we have reserved both those nights.
Yep. Yep.
that'd be a great way to get the community input too, to tell all the town meeting members about financial forum and whoever else is following it.
I don't know if there's any other questions for November. We'll get you whatever Voc School information we can. I have a fair amount, but I don't want to speak for them if they want to.
That sounds good to me. All right, then the last item is minutes from the forum on the 31st. Jackie, great job on the minutes, by the way. There's a lot in here, so thanks so much for putting all this together.
What is the date again?
8/31.
I did read it.
Oh, I know.
Move to approve the minutes dated August 31st, 2021.
Second.
Thanks, Mark. Did anybody see anything in the minutes they needed to change, or? All right, so we will go to vote. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes?
Jean,
Yes.
Ed, yes, 8-0. Terrific. Anything else, any other business? Sorry, Jean.
Yes. At the financial forum, we sort of had some initial conversations about ARPA funds and how we might spend them. And tonight there was even more discussion around this kind of, I feel like there's kind of a consensus emerging in this room that moving forward with some representatives from the select board, from the school committee, with FinCom, certainly staff involvement. So I feel like we're working towards a consensus of what has to happen next. I'm thinking maybe on September 30th, there should be something on the agenda.
Yep.
And I'm not actually quite clear on, is that something that you and the other chairs kind of go off and come back? Or I don't quite know the mechanism to get there, but I think it'd be good if on the 30th we could have a kind of a discussion of what that might look like. Because to your point, at the school committees, people are discussing it and want to know how these decisions are going to be made, so.
Yep. No, that sounds good.
Okay.
We should put that on the agenda. Anything else from anybody?
Hey, I have some good news. I told Bob I was getting this gizmo. It's like a CO2 thing, no doctors in the room, right? So I read this doctor said that he sent these little gizmos in the backpacks with the kids to school. And if it's like around 600 or less, he felt comfortable that there was, well, so they upgraded the air filtration. He said he felt like-
circulation?
Yeah, so this has been like 597 to 610 all night, so I've been keeping an eye on it, so that sounds good.
Great work, Bob.
I'm gonna try it out this
That's great, a lot of hot air on this side of the table too, it's close to us too. That's
Are
not
those
bad.
things we could give to our, actually, are those expensive? Could our teachers have those?
It's like $75 on Amazon Prime, there might be cheaper versions.
Buy them in bulk,
Interesting.
use the ARPA funds.
Oh, you have to little smiley faces.
But give the teachers some confidence. or
Son,
something.
if you
say
never
that.
smiley face,
I
you're good.
didn't know, I wasn't, I figured it was a rough
Hopefully
draft.
it's not.
There goes that money.
Exactly.
It's cheap enough.
Let's play that to Doug.
Exactly.
Well, I was hoping it would be like an Echo Dot price, like $30, and you say, okay.
There are different ones. One made this recommendation to get this like technical feature.
Oh, the
of
teachers
it,
are getting
so I
like
got
Christmas
it.
gifts.
That's right,
I've
there you
got
go.
a little more.
Yeah, now we know what to get the teachers.
Okay, wait, now you're talking too much. I went up to 628.
Yeah,
Stop talking.
There's just too much laughter. All right, well then, if there's no other business,
Move to adjourn?
Second.
thanks, Mary Ann, that was quick, like it. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe, Eric,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Ed, yes, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for your time. Bad.
Well played, sir.
Not bad.